Hey folks, this is Matt Chat and this is my plywood canoe building adventure. It was supposed to be a cheap 2-week project, but instead it took a couple of months. I ended up building 2 canoes, built a canoe carrying dolly, a boat rack for my truck, and a hanging system for canoe storage. I made tons of mistakes and probably would have given up if it weren't for the money I had already spent. It became an amazing adventure, all for a canoe I wasn't sure I was going to use. Well, it's a new day and I'm going to continue cutting. I worked a little late into the evening last night, so excited was I about this project. But I still have some cutting on the main plank, so I'm going to get to that, get it finished, and then I can get on to sanding the pieces and making sure they're all perfect. Now that I've finished cutting the wood, it's time to take it, compare piece to piece, make sure that everything is the same. So this is the type of thing I'm talking about. You can see here there's quite the difference between this piece, these 2 pieces here, and the pieces inside. So I'm going to have to sand this so that they all have the same curve. And that is going to be the only way that I can make this canoe work. It doesn't really matter which curve is right, although I'm careful about that too, but what really matters is that I get all curves the same. So here we are next morning, day 3. I managed to sand most of the pieces last night. I was just finishing off the bottom piece here. I decided, since I bought some plywood that was good one side only, I figured I may as well spend a bit of time sanding the bad side because it only takes a few minutes and it does improve the surface quite well. What I've got left here is these 2 pieces here. Are supposed to go to the end of the bottom piece on one side to lengthen it to the 12-foot mark. And I discovered that I had done a mistake in the cuts, inexperience in this case, and the cuts for these are rather straight compared to the cuts that have a curve on the other side. I thought about shaping it so that it was all the same, but in the end decided against it. I think that by leaving it this way, it'll have a front and a back. There will be one part, the part with the straight lines will slice in the water a bit better. So that should be the front of the canoe. That's my hope anyways. So from this point on, I'm going to be just finishing off a little bit of sanding, and then it's going to be starting to plan on the assembly of the parts, because I've got to make this connect on to the other piece, and I've got several other pieces I've got to do the same with. So I've got to figure out how to do that and how to make it solid. So to connect the wood together, I've decided that I'm going to use some of my junk lumber. Why not? Always a good excuse. This is the stuff I found. It's painted brown on one side, old wood, but solid pine, not too heavy. But I don't like the surface. It's crooked, it's bent. So I want to clean it all up by going through the planer. So let's get that done. So I've clamped down my pieces and I'm ready to glue the wood onto. That goes like this. It'll go like that. And I'm going to use some Gorilla Glue, which reacts to water. So the first thing I'm supposed to do is spread some water all over the surface that's going to be glued. So this piece has been glued. It's now time to add the new piece, which is going to go over here like this. It's been fitted and shaped. Hopefully that'll fit right. So the first step is to add the water. Okay. Now for the glue. To spread the glue, I'm going to use a piece of wood because I did not like how the paper towel I used worked. One more glue up, this time the long member on the side of the canoe. So this is next morning. I've finished gluing all the pieces, and this is the last one here. I thought I'd show you this one here. I made some mistakes along the way. The first one that I made, I glued the piece down, and when I came back to pick it up or check it out, it had slipped. I had put large weights on it, and I couldn't explain to myself why it had slipped because the large weights were there. The second one, I was much more careful, put a lot more weight on it, and it still slipped. So this was my third attempt, the last one I had to do, of course, but I think this one worked rather well. It did not move in any way, and I just thought I'd show you the benefit of my mistakes, and you could take advantage of this. The problem with these pieces is that they're so long that in order to glue them properly, I needed a very long surface. So as you can see here, it's taken a very long counter for me to do this. And the technique I used was the least amount of work possible. I just marked it out on the counter with a pencil on the side that was complete, and then flipped it around on the side that was going to be glued, and then put the glue on there, making sure that it matched the outline with the pencils. And that worked very well, and it made sure that the shape of the pieces is going to be exactly perfect without me having to worry too much about it. But of course this meant that because they were so long, they had to be further to the back because I have objects in the way. Excuse me. So I had to clamp it at the back, and it's very difficult to clamp stuff at the back of the counter. At the front I've got something to grab onto, but at the back I don't. So this is the system I came up with. I tried variations of this, but this was the best one. As you can see, it's clamped over here. I've got the piece going across like this. It's not touching over here at this part, and it's putting lots of pressure on this longer piece, which is transferring all the pressure right across to this, and hence across to both ends like this. And by having it centered on the piece, the pressure goes straight down. So this is a good way of transferring the pressure from here over to here. It worked. You'll notice I also used paper here, because if you don't put the paper down, the glue will seep through the crack and glue your piece to the counter, and then you'll never get it off. So it's something to avoid. The paper I can rip off and then sand the little pieces that are left at some later point. Now that the clamping is all done, I'm ready to cut the pieces that I've put on and sand them down so that they fit the pieces properly. Fixing the mistakes that I did early on when they slipped, some of them, and then just some fine sanding to make sure that they match the curves. So let's get at it. So I've set up two pieces opposite each other. The ones just be above the floor of the boat, and they're opposite each other like this, and they want you then to start taping it with duct tape, which is what I'm about to do right now, and we're going to see how well that puts together. So I tried my first assembly and I wasn't really satisfied with the effort. It felt all way too jiggly. You know, you were just moving a lot of pieces that just kept wanting to fall all over each other. So on the spot I decided to improvise. So what I've done is I've added a trim to the side pieces for the boat. So I'm going to use these as a surface that will hold the bottom so that it doesn't fall in, and it should make it far easier to assemble. So I'm about ready to start the assembly process of this canoe. I have to say that I'm somewhat daunted. Doing this alone seems rather impossible. You're supposed to align the edges of the pieces so that they're 90 degrees, but essentially that means there's no real support up or down or anything. And just keeping them just on the little lip like that is impossible on curved surfaces just by goodwill alone. You need to have some type of system to make it happen. I tried putting a little bit of wood trim, but quickly realized that wood trim would not help the situation at all. It just makes things stiffer, the angles are wrong, you can't get the glue in. There's just too many reasons why you shouldn't use it. Trains. So I decided to go for stitching, which is the standard way to assemble these types of boats. They just say that you can bypass that and use duct tape in here, but I'm finding that too difficult. So I'm going for the stitching system. So basically you drill holes and you put some wire through, you twist tie the wire for temporarily, and then you glue it all up, and once it's glued up you remove the stitches and put some glue in the holes where the stitches were. So I'm going to start on this and we'll see how that goes. Last night working with the stitching, I got quite excited and it went together fairly fast once I got the hang of it. I didn't pause for any filming or anything, I just kept at it until the shape took form. And there it is behind me. I'm just going to step out there, you can see that. Take a look at that, eh? Unbelievable that that's plywood. Look at that shape. Now it's just a rudimentary setup right now. I've got just a stick in the middle holding it apart. But it's enough for me to know what I'm doing here is worthwhile. So I've decided to head off and go buy the rest of the products that I need to finish this canoe. All the fiberglass resin and all that stuff. So that's what I'm going to do now. Hopefully I'll be lucky and be able to find all the things I need, because they are hard to get, I have to say. That's going to be it for this part of my canoe building adventures. I want to thank you for joining in, and I want to remind you not to forget to subscribe to my channel. Hopefully we'll find a lot of progress in the next episode. See you soon.